Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Book Club of California's live and online program titled Representation, Reason, and Rewilding in the State of Fire. Thank you for joining us here in the club rooms and for joining us on Zoom. And welcome, Happy New Year to everyone. For those of you that are new to the Book Club of California, we are a nonprofit member and donor-supported organization that is dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. Oftentimes we do that with a focus on the history and the literature of California and the West. The book club publishes limited edition, finely made books. We have a scholarly journal called the Quarterly Newsletter, and we have keepsakes, letterpress printed keepsakes for our members. We host a year-round series of programs and exhibitions like the one this evening on topics including fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, California history, and much, much more. Now, if you're not a member of the book club or if your membership has lapsed and you're interested in what we do, I urge you to consider joining our century-long tradition. Our membership dues are modest, our benefits are many, and we simply can't do the work of the book club without the support of our members. So I encourage you to go online to bccbooks.org to find out more or to speak with me after tonight's program. And now for tonight's program and our presenter. The program is titled Representation, Reason, and Rewilding in the State of Fire. And our presenter is author, illustrator, and naturalist Obi Kaufmann. Now, Obi is an award-winning author of many, many best-selling books on California's ecology, biodiversity, and geography. You may know some of them. We have some of them up here, which are for sale if you're interested after the program. The California Field Atlas, The State of Water, Understanding California's Most Precious Natural Resource, The Forests of California, another California Field Atlas, The Coasts of California, a California Field Atlas, and the final chapter in the California Field Atlas trilogy was The Deserts of California, California Field Atlas. Obi is a lifelong resident of California. He makes his home in Oakland, just across the bay. His essays and paintings have been published in Dark Mountain Literary Journal, Zizava Literary Journal, Bay Nature Magazine, Western Art and Architecture, Sunset Magazine, Juxtapose Magazine, and On the Range Magazine, among others. He regularly posts his work on Instagram as at Coyote Thunder, so at Coyote Thunder. Tonight, Obi will talk about the latest in his Field Atlas series. It's called The State of Fire, Why California Burns. Now, The State of Fire explores the transformation of the resource landscape of California from its ancient origins through modern challenges to its future possibilities. It demonstrates how we learn from the deep ecological past to uncover truths about the potential future of the California floristic province and the role that people have played and will continue to play in the millennia to come. Now, if you have questions for our speaker, hold them to the end. We will have time for questions at the end. I'll come back up here to help with that in the room, but I'll also take questions from those of you out there on Zoom. So now, enough of me. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, author, illustrator, and naturalist, Obi Kaufmann.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure we're going to work.
We're going to work. We're going to
I got
work.
some water for you here too, my friend.
Thank you very much. All right. Jacob, am I on? Am I on? Can everybody hear me okay in the back? I'm very impressed with the acoustics of this new space. All right, very good. Heather, you found a spot. Very good. I was afraid you were going to try and stand for my whole presentation. I'm probably going to lecture for about 45 minutes or so. Thank you for that really generous introduction there, Kevin. It's interesting. The only time you used the word nature was actually the only slip up in your introduction, might I say. And I have to, and it was to the subtitle of my second book, which is The State of Water, the only book that I don't have here tonight. I'm actually sold out of it post-holiday season. Wow. The State of Water, the subtitle of which is understanding California's most precious resource. You said understanding California's most precious natural resource. And the word natural, related, of course, a derivation of the word nature, is a word you didn't use anywhere else in my introduction. I'm grateful to you for that, because as I am now endeavoring into my next series of books, and we'll talk about that throughout the thing here. You're not supposed to see these images yet. There we go. I am less and less convinced of the existence of nature at all. In fact, it's an impediment to saving the more than human world. If you want to talk about parameters of homeostasis, given the physiological, biological dynamic, the population dynamic of what our species aims and hopes to be going forward the rest of the 21st century and into the 22nd century. Now, that all being said, that was a lot to chew on there. There was a lot to unpack there. Over the next hour and a half, I invite you, please, to become sort of I deputize you as an ecological philosopher. You've spent your whole life considering your relationship to this grand biosphere, this grand ecosphere, this planet that we all thrive on and endure in alternating cycles of suffering and health. And yet I know that despite what you are sold every day, there's this longing in you that might consider the deep time field theory of biogeography in California. And what I mean by that is, like, here we are in this place of places. What is California? I am from California, and yet, am I from California? How does one be from anywhere? If there's one question that has chased me throughout these books and continues to chase me like some sort of hellhound, it is this question. How do I stop settling or even colonizing my own mind? How do I decolonize my mind? What does that even mean? Well, I'm an artist. These books are art. Okay, before I'm gonna jump off that diving board, I really want to say that now that I've said that, and you see these titles, I want you to now imagine questions for me, because in about 45 minutes, I'm going to ask you for those questions, because I assuredly will not have answered a single one in this presentation, or maybe surreptitiously I will have. We shall see. We shall see. By the end of tonight, we're going to uncover perhaps some answers to some questions that we see in the headlines these days. Like, for example, why is going to Mars not only a bad idea, but perhaps entirely anti-scientific or anti-science in its nature and in its endeavor? Or, more to my own heart, how poetry has historically directly influenced policy. How poetry is a political force in the world, and what might poetry even be? Because, my friends, I am more at home with the word poet than I am artist these days. I'm a painter, and most of the times when I, over the past 35 years or whatever, that I've really been attempting to be this thing, like this professional, like, gallery painter or whatever I tried to do for X, Y, or Z decade. I am always asked, like, well, you mean you paint houses? As if the discipline itself has like eroded to some meaninglessness, as opposed to a serious endeavor. And yet I just gave the keynote at the Tahoe Literary Conference And I'm there in a room of 250 like poets and writers and authors, and I say things like, what if it's our fault? What if we have not engaged this new world in this with what you are, with the power that you are as poets, the vanguard of language. And what I mean by poetry is not on a cliff writing verse. What I mean by poetry is the very serious practice of language creation, which is tied directly to cultural creation, which is the rejection of old vocabulary, the injection of syntax and diction such that a new story gets told, not a new argument gets made. And this is what we were talking about. I learned a new word today when I looked up my book, my first book, The California Field Atlas, on Wikipedia. It said genre atlas, and then it said sui generis. Sui generis. Yeah. Sui. Is it sui generis? Yeah. Sui generis. Sui generis is probably my Californian accent on the Latin, my accent on the dead language, right? Right. Meaning meaning entirely the thing that I did was invent the field atlas, which is a genre that doesn't exist, except, in my sort of database of one here, which is not a road atlas. I'm not concerned with anything. I'm not concerned with telling you how to get to anywhere. It's not the where of things necessarily. It's certainly not a field guide. I'm not concerned necessarily with what you are looking at. If you want a book like that, this book isn't going to help you. This is more like the how of things, how these enormous living systems, this matrix of earth, air, fire, and water coalesce to define this most beautiful of all places, this California. And that's the endeavor. And so I needed a new word to describe the character of California that I was going for, a character that has always been, remains, and always shall be, despite all this wonderful collected dust. The Book Club of California, this is my third time talking here. I'm so indebted and grateful truly to Kevin for inviting me back. But it's a book you all represent a sort of this is an endangered event. This is an endangered experience, isn't it? Perhaps this is something that is I wonder, here we are in 2025. I mean, we can certainly pause for at least half a beat and suggest, like, maybe social media, for example, has hit a kind of peak. We just had our first podcast election, for example. We're going to now have a podcast presidency as legacy media goes away. And yet, this authoritative interface of information, the book, remains. And in fact, by many matrices, is resurgent, even in the third decade of the 21st century. A couple of them that have thoroughly inspired me over the years continue to do so. We have Barry Lopez, who probably taught me how to write a sentence. We have Edward Wilson, the greatest American naturalist, who coined that term consilience. He didn't coin it, he expanded consilience. I mean, Edward Wilson, E.O. Wilson is accredited with like the word biodiversity. He's accredited with like sociobiology. I mean, he's he's a wonderful font of scientific poetry. And yet consilience, the idea of like these great schools of human thought, right? The physical sciences and the humanities, then is the source of not only truth, but then finally meaning. Black Holes and Warp Space-Time was my father's book. William John Kaufmann III was my father. Dr. Kaufmann's son was going to be a mathematician. I have a lot more training in math than I do in art. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father, for brainwashing my notions of reality. And yet, of course, I was, in true Californian style, born somewhat of a rebel and always, but like, father, dad, what is it about Mount Diablo? What is it that I feel out there? What is this aesthetic arrest? What is James Joyce talking about? I feel like the young artist he's speaking to. Dick Smith, Condor Journal. Oof. Nature. When I was in the 80s, cutting my teeth as a young backpacker in the Ventana Wilderness, there were no condor. There were no otters. There were no whales. There were no white-tailed American kites. There were no tule elk. There were no peregrine falcons. We can go on and on and on. Yet all those species, that bouquet of species that I just mentioned are all rebounding in the 21st century. Good love, good science, good story being told. I thought nature was something that happened, something that I missed, and yet we've only just begun. The rock paintings of the Chumash. Chumash influenced me more than any other painting culture in the world, including the European culture. We're going to get to that in a second. And then Wallace Stegner. Oh, God, I spent a lot of time wrestling with this guy. Untrammeled wilderness, huh? Was that your word that you put in the Federal Wilderness Act of 1964? This is a piece of outdated poetry. The Endangered Species Act of 1973. How about the Endangered Phenomena Act of 2073? Perhaps it's time to stop legislating against things and start legislating for things. So here we have page 17 of my father's doctoral thesis, and 3 problems in astrophysics. In the lower right-hand corner, we have a Chumash wall painting that's about 12 feet in length from left to right. That the reason that I skipped most of my classes in college at UC Santa Barbara, traipsing around the Santa Ynez Mountains looking for these art sites. There's hundreds of them. Most of them are still secret. And most of the oral narrative is lost, and yet that too is resurgent. It's always direly important to not speak of Native California in the past tense. And yet I wonder what is the language of the truth way here? What is the semiotics certainly being expressed here? What is the arrest being? How is the arrest expressing itself in my mind? If I were to show this Chumash artist my painting of Mount Lassen, would they not be as mystified as I am of their painting of certainly what is the core of culturally relative poetry inside of this specific parameter, this homeostatic parameter of cultural significance, this lexicon we operate within, back and forth between audience and maker. I am an artist. What I understand about this artist down here is that here we have an artist who's communicating to their people a culturally specific and relevant relationship to the more than human world. Hey, I have the same job description. And yet now, of course, we have this new hieroglyphic alphabet that has emerged, and that threatens to certainly transform all epistemological foundations of what it is to make a poem, for example. I have yet to see a published book of poetry with nothing but emojis. It's coming. Just wait. And I welcome it. I am not saying this is inherently bad, and neither should you. Neither should you be scared. Because the amount of meaning that is inherent in these emojis, between the emojis, what emoji is, what's the context of the texted emoji, is incredibly sensitive and incredibly nuanced. My niece was telling me, a thumbs up is basically a middle finger. What do you like? You talk to Gen Z; they've got some things to say. But like, as the activity of scrolling is replacing the activity of reading, as the thing that people do, what opportunities then are presented to to recontextualize the history that we cherish. And it's all still there. It's all still there. Whatever is still there is still there. My podcast co-host is Greg Saris, the author Greg Saris, and he's also chairman of the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria up in Santa Rosa. And he's also a literature professor at Stanford and on the UC Regents and all that kind of stuff. And Greg Saris wrote this about his teacher, the great Pomo, Southern Pomo dream basket weaver, Mabel McKay. And I'm going to probably quote Mabel McKay a few times tonight because she's had a big influence on me too. How could she not? When she says things like, imagination doesn't exist. What am I supposed to do with that? Because I think what she means, that imagination doesn't exist, is that it's all real. Everything is here. And I think this is important for ecological thought. Everything is here right now. Nothing that you can imagine is not real because it is within your mind. And without your mind. And then that book by Joseph Beuys that I've got sitting at my desk for the past 35 years, simply because of the title. You know, and Joseph Beuys, the German artist who, if you don't know who Joseph Beuys is, in the 1940s, he locked himself in a gallery behind glass, wrapped in felt wool with a cane. And there was also a coyote in the cage with him for a week on end. That was his level of basically saying the same thing. Imagination doesn't exist. So then where does this all leave us? In my own sort of like construct of ecological philosophy, I've written 6 books on this stuff and I've only just begun. I'm gonna share with you what I'm going to do next, because technically, my friends, my book tour is done. I'm talking to you here tonight. Like, I'm already like in writing mode, you know. Like, I'm not here like, buy my book. You know, I'd love for you to buy my book, but I don't really care. Like, what I want is to like really, I'm working this out in real time. I'm not presenting any kind of sound bites. You know, I want to be friends with you. I commend the Book Club of California for existing at all. I am like here to like help. Let's put some nutrients back in the soil. Like, I wonder, for example, like how many people are on Zoom as opposed to here tonight. And I wonder what the demographic is. Where are you from? I bet most of the people are from Northern California, not Southern California. That's an interesting demographic. I mean, I bet most of the people in our audience tonight have at least 10 silver hairs, shall we say, on their skull. Oh yeah, there's one person I see who does not. I mean, one person that says something. That says something about where we are. Because I think like even getting together to do things, whew, I'm not sure. It's a very complex situation demographically. And what complex systems always yield is, oh yeah, here we go, complexity. What complex systems always yield is emergent phenomena across a dancing terrain of variables. Right? This is, if I was to go into mathematics, my father would be so proud. Mathematics is a language of reality, son. But what about beauty? Complexity. Complexity is not the study of what is complicated. Like, this is a complicated piece of machinery, right? My watch. This is not a complex piece of machinery. A complex system is capable of describing something far more adaptive. This word, adaptive, is a word that just comes up again and again in my work, and will as I push past words like conservation, preservation, restoration, all of these project specific words across landscape types and political narratives that are coming out of Sacramento. It's like, well, yes, and yet, where is the anthropos? Where is the human mind here? And what is the nature of that medicine? Consilience, we talked about that, complexity, and then of course aesthetics. Where my heart is and shall be, my first and my last vocation. I do not have a job, I do not have a career, I have a vocation. And that vocation is tied to my identity with the land of California. I joke as a ravenous autodidact that I have put myself through graduate school and have come out the other end with a PhD in California biogeography. And you know, do you need more evidence? I mean, I can give you it. We can talk about things. And yet, the thing that I have a very hard time reconciling, and I will spend the next books doing so, and I'm going to lay that out here in a moment, is that there is sort of a human-shaped hole in my books. Next Monday night, I believe we're going to be talking about John Muir's legacy. And you know, I spent my youth as a John Muir wannabe of sorts, like just in love with California. And yet I shared the same pathology that John Muir did. And this is a nearsightedness. This is, in fact, it tends towards even blindness towards what I'm even looking at. John Muir had no idea what he was looking at. And coming to terms with that is very important. The pristine wilderness. It was a placeholder idea that was inextricably linked to the genocide, enslavement, and erasure of California's indigenous cultures. A lot of those ideas, there are indigenous people suffering right now because a lot of those ideas that he so successfully propagated. There's a lot of baby in that bathwater, I get it. But I think of the diet. I think of the diet of what are generally called the Ohlone people, which is one of these neologisms that is embraced by much of the local people of the Bay Area to this day, and yet these family groups that have existed in their modern form probably for about 6,000 years or so, since the mid-Holocene climate optimum, when San Francisco Bay became a water body, became a physiographic feature. When archaeological records describe 600 or so of these massive shell mounds across and around the Bay Area, where the mature modern tribal politic was largely established throughout much of the California floristic province, and where, finally, I'm going to use the word fire, and where much of the fire technology was already mature. And yet 6,000 years ago, you know, it seems like such a long time ago, but when you think about how potent that ubiquitous stewardship was across California floristic province, when I say to you that the configuration of California ecosystems is 100% a product of anthropogenic influence. And now I'm not saying that it's completely designed and engineered, but it would be something completely different were it not for these already mature systems of landscape management at the 1,000 years before the building of the first pyramids. But botanically, that's very recent. California's forest configuration is really only about as old as the Great Pyramids. That bespeaks again to the adaptability of California as a ecological entity, but it also describes something that is a particularly potent symbol of hope in this moment, in 2025, that California is an artificial thing. It is constructed and it is held and it is managed by this tool right here. And it has always been so, at least throughout the Holocene, which is an interesting thing to say. I mean, look at the supermarket that opens up with this pyroculture, this eschewing of Middle Eastern agricultural technologies, this eschewing of that sort of like just farm the land until there's no nutrients left. These plants all existed and were nutritive vectors to feed local populations because of the regular application of fire on the land. That's a supermarket. And you know what that is? That is blue zone diet, to use a modern parlance, if you will. That is these colonial diseases that everyone in this room right now is concerned about, whether it's diabetes or Alzheimer's or, whatever it is, heart disease, didn't exist. I'm not talking about some sort of idyllic projection of native culture that is like in harmony with nature, which I think is like just terrible poetry. It's terrible fantasy. It's not at all what happened, but I'm talking about abundance, talking about technologies of reciprocity, to use that word. What do we have here? We at time of contact, there were more languages in California spoken than there were languages spoken across the entirety of the North American continent in California. There was that much abundance. There was that much like differentiation between cultures. And whenever this is a worldwide phenomenon to this day, wherever you have like a huge heterogeneity of indigenous languages, you have a corresponding rate of biodiversity. The California floristic province is 4% of the landmass of North America, and yet 6,800 native species of plants, about a third of which are endemic to the state. It's about double what it is across the rest of the North American botanical province outside of Mexico. It's because of fire. And yet, here I have three images. I have the burned heartwood of a redwood. This redwood is fine. Heartwood is the dead part of the tree, and you'll get fire chimneys that go for months and months and months. You can tell that I'm from gleaning already that I'm talking about large patterns in California biogeographic time, but if you want to talk about like fire and its specific adaptivities within individual species, I'm well versed in that as well. So I love talking about that. The thing that is the redwood tree that is evolutionarily designed to live for 2,000 years. There's very little you can do about it. You can even chop the tree down at the base and it'll grow back in a clonal state. So we still have redwoods. That's why it has an alternate turn to cattle land. It wants to burn every 10 years. It needs the fire. It's made to withstand fire. Fire is a nutritive element of the landscape. And yet the spotted owl, who lives and who dies in the Anthropocene? What is nature? What is natural? The fact that spotted owls are still alive is unnatural. How about that? For a paradox. Directly exposing the lie that is the word nature. the average fire return interval throughout in pre-settlement fire regions by ecotype. We have California is designed to burn and burn regularly. It's a language, it's a love language. Fire is California's love language. I don't think I've ever said that before. Of course, now we're in different conditions. Here are three primary biotic vectors represented as species that are underrepresented in the 21st century, as they might have been at the beginning, 100 years ago, 1924, 25, when we said goodbye to the last California grizzly bear in Sequoia National Forest. 90 years ago, before Folsom Dam, before Melenis Dam, before all of those dams up and down the ladder of east-west running rivers that go up to Sierra Nevada, the Chinook runs would have numbered hundreds of thousands every year of returning 35, 40-pound people-sized fish, often sustaining bear populations of 18 per square mile. And these were big bears, big bears. And when I say big bear, I'm talking about polar bears, big polar bear. Think of the biggest polar bear. Big polar bear comes in at 1,900 pounds. Apparently California grizzlies routinely top 2,000 pounds plus. Yet they weren't, what do you say, man killers. Completely different relationship with the bear back in the day. And then, of course, the ever industrious beaver, 15 million strong at the beginning of the fur rush. You have to remember it, 20 years before that guy found that pretty rock in that river outside of our state's capital. There was the fur rush where, white men would just walk up rivers, be called mountain men, and just like get state parks named after them 150 years later. And then, just killing a beaver, one every kilometer of water course throughout the state, sending them to New York to get, hats. That's right. Become pieces of fashion that deteriorate rather quickly. Can you detect the contempt in my voice? When you have a beaver on a stream, what it does tirelessly is engineer that local watershed for a community of biodiversity that is upwards of 50%, a 50-fold increase in localized biodiversity. Takes that water, slows it down, spreads it out, sinks it into the aquifer. And what you get then is probably the primary reason why over the past 2,000 years, when California has endured 2 or 3 mega droughts, oh, we get panicked at 5 years of drought, don't we? The next mega drought's coming because it's California, and California knows how to get hot. We don't. A mega drought lasts for a century. We have seen over the paleoclimate research in California that throughout these mega droughts, didn't lose one stitch of biodiversity. Not one species was gone. This is largely due to the way that, remember I said 15 million beaver, 1 per kilometer water course? Can you imagine how much storage that is? Even a mega drought. There's a lot of biomimicry to learn from there. Here's the rough draft to a much cleaner version of this graph that appears in my book. But this is sort of what we get. It's rainier towards the top and drier towards the bottom. These long oscillations between planetary influences. The mid-Holocene climate optimum, where it was 3 degrees centigrade hotter than it is today, and it's already 1.8 degrees centigrade hotter on average year after year in the California floristic province than it is, and that's just since 1895. So we're probably a lot hotter than that, blowing away IPCC thresholds or whatever, California is already very hot. We're gonna get hot. And this is just what's happening. This is good news. Being forewarned is being forearmed. And you know, this is important information to get out there. I'm not, this isn't doomerism, right? This is like community. This isn't even activism. I don't really agree with that word either. I think that first we have to present the ecological philosophy. The first thing that there is the understanding of these great systems of how California moves. And then we design everything on top of that. And actually, it's going to all come down to fire. Fire, the big thing in all the headlines. Anthropogenic landscapes. You know, I was the 2023 artist in residence at the Whiskeytown National Recreation Area up there in Whiskeytown, outside of Redding. Whiskeytown. I say Whiskeytown is like Las Vegas for 6 months of the year, and then like Portland, Oregon for the other 6 months of the year. It goes from 120 degrees to 60 degrees, and they get a lot of rain, and and yet it's completely anthropogenic landscape. The reservoir is here. That's man-made. The entire, like, all the invasive grasses have completely deformed the naturalized burn regime. The roads have fragmented the habitat configurations. I mean, what are we talking about? We're talking about like the natural state of things. Is there any nature here? I could not find any. And yet the conditions were just right in 2018 for the Carr Fire to occur. The Carr Fire was one of these mega fires, one of these 21st century mega fires that I detail at great length in my book, The State of Fire here. And what we have with the Carr Fire is a fire tornado. When fire tornadoes happen, because of this great fire drought, right? This fire drought that still encompasses most of California. Remember all those fire regimes I was talking about before that California is meant to burn? Hasn't happened in 100 years. This great fire drought that is continuing has set the stage for the fire tornado that hit the suburb of Redding in 2018. It's a half-mile wide. It was 3 miles tall, punched a hole right in the stratosphere with energy equivalents to many kilotons of dynamite, many thousands of pounds of dynamite, equivalent to multiple Nagasaki bombs going off. At those temperatures, 2,500 degrees to 3,000 degrees, houses don't burn. Houses vaporize in less than 5 minutes. Your porcelain tub is gone. Your stove is gone. The flashover effect just. The fire tornado happens in these anthropogenic landscapes. This thing that is fire that cannot be denied and is always on its way. How do you deal with the character of fire? More fire equals less fire, as a matter of fact, when properly managed. More fire is less fire. Fire tornadoes only happen in this desperate extremes of these regime deformations. Saw There Will Be Blood this summer for the first time. Moved to silence for a few days, as a matter of fact. Daniel Plainview, the oil man of the Central Valley. What rough beast in its hour come around at last, slouches towards California to be born. This is Yeats, but contemporary Shelley said, poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. What is it? What is this industrial mind, this colonizing mind that has no sense of land, but just wants to make it bleed? Certainly then the falcon cannot hear the falconer, and the center will not hold. That is all a denial of one's responsibility, and especially in a democratic context. Come on, what are we talking about? It's January 6th today. Let's not forget that weird point. But this is a democratic conversation, or it's nothing. I believe in that system. I always will. For every right that we enjoy, there's a responsibility that we must attend to. Fire happens. In California, trees are made of fire waiting to burn. The clock is always ticking. Fire is on the way. Fire does not have to be the enemy. What have we got here? Fire doesn't kill, forest policy does. The fire policy will dictate the quality of humanity's continued residency here in the distant future. Finally, California burns because of decisions that people make. California burns because of decisions that people make, even irregardless of trees. Lightning even falls upon patterns of the landscape that is designed by humans. It's always been this way. It'll always be this way. Waking up to one's responsibility, waking up to that balance between the responsibility and the rights certainly is a way forward. Then what am I talking about? I'm talking about something for which there is already precedent. I'm talking about a full-scale transformation of fire policy in California, which is on the way, totally on the way. Just passed a $10 billion bond, the most money ever given to any bond proposition in the history of the United States of America, was just passed in California this year, and a lot of it's going to fire. And what are we going to do with fire? Well, we're going to transform the pyroscape, the landscape. But how can we do that? Certainly, it's too big. Certainly, well, take a look at what we did with water. Water. What California has done, and when I mean California, I mean American California. I mean, what California has done in the past 90 years with water rivals anything humans have done with anything anywhere at any point in human history. I'll put it up against the Great Pyramids. I'll put it up against the Great Wall. This is the Great Water Project of California. Like, the amount of water that gets transported from point A to point B in California every minute of every day is an astounding infrastructural wonder. And certainly then is precedent to the unparalleled transformative capacity of, remember this tool when I held it in my hand like this before? I'll hold that up again. Here we have a map out of Sacramento at the right here, which is connected landscape types, right? We're talking about the value of biodiversity. We're talking about how the systems, the ecological services that are provided to us support human settlement, as they have done everywhere throughout the history of humankind. The red lines here are salmonid habitat that have been cut off, save for that top red line that is now open. There's the largest dam removal in American history, which has happened over the past 6 months. Removal of the 4 dams of the Upper Klamath River watershed that now clearly represent the best chance for the continued existence of salmonid populations in California going into the latter half of the 21st century. The next day, I'm not talking about like the next week. I'm not talking about a year from later after the dams came down. The next day, Coho we're tracing spawning grounds in ancestral waters that they hadn't in 90 years. They're waiting for us. This year we're going to see the Eel River come down. This year we're going to see a lot of connectivity restoration. That's not just about the yellow bits of the map here are pieces that we need to connect landscape types, but we're talking about connecting waterscape types as well. Biodiverse lands mean strong human communities. For every point of despair, there's a point of hope. I feel like I play tennis all day long with people, with doomers. The doomer movement is over. I'm happy to say. And what I mean by that is that with the incoming presidential administration, the age of the climate resistance movement must end. We are now in the climate adaptivity movement. There are planetary forces bearing down on California, and California is ready and able to fight. Like, remember I told you California knows how to get hot? It's like, okay, well, let's roll with that then. If we're gonna get hot, let's get hot. Let's design this thing. We have, it looks like we're gonna overtake Germany for nominal GDP per annum this year. And that is, it's like $4 trillion. $4 trillion. Let's figure this out. And it looks like we are. I mean, we have a non-inept gubernatorial administration right now that is working towards all of these pieces towards putting together towards acknowledging the nuance, acknowledging the complexity, and understanding what rewards there are. The black bears. There's more black bears in California than there ever have been in the geologic history of California. Remember, I told you that they're missing their big sister, the grizzly bear. But the CDFW, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, just upped their population estimates to 65,000 black bears in California right now. We love our apex predators. More on that later. And so finally we come to, what is the story? Remember I said that little quip about what is it? I'm not making an argument. I want to tell a story. There's no habitat space on Earth not touched by the industrialized hand of humanity, yet every human community is maintained by homeostatic parameters within an ecological architecture informed by ancient and fathomlessly complex biodiversity. It's the first sentence in my book. And then now I just signed a book deal for 3 more books with my dear friends and comrades at Heyday Books in Berkeley. And I'm going to spend the next few years writing these. I just have made my first big paintings of the next book that I'm working on, The Origins of California. And I can't wait, Kevin, for you to have me back for that one. I'll see you in the fall of 2026. And then, of course, I am a painter. If you all are looking for a beautiful piece of something over your fireplace, don't hesitate to hire me. In any case, I really appreciate your kind attention. That's kind of what I got. Thank you so much. Did I answer anybody's like predetermined questions, or do we have some time for questions?
Yeah, we have some.
I didn't ramble for, oh, good, it's before 7.
We're in good time. We want to make sure people can get a book, because I think some people want to grab a copy of the book and have you sign it. But if there
Yeah,
are some
I'll be around
questions,
until everybody gets a copy.
let's take a couple questions if there are any here in the club rooms. Oh, no hands up. Let's see if there's any on Zoom. I see no questions on Zoom right now. You will be back in 2026, 2028.
I didn't get to like why Mars is a bad idea, or I didn't get to like how poetry influences policy. I didn't get to why biodiversity is important. I didn't get to how did grizzly bears influence fire regimes in ancient California. I didn't get to the modern threats of the state of the forests now and how that's influencing fire. You know, does anybody want to talk about any of that?
These little teasers.
Yes, sir, my man. Y'all know Deep Oakland?
Yeah.
I got
it's
a-
here.
yeah.
Thanks. You've put all these books out because you've been out in nature, painting, outdoors.
Out in the backcountry, we can call it.
Been out-
How about that?
been outdoors.
Always in nature. We're in nature right now.
That are there, and now you're gonna look at the origins of California, you're gonna go into the deep past.
Yes,
What are you painting now?
right. Well, right now I'm imagining life on the Farallon Steppe. Farallon Steppe, we have, I'm talking to a geologist here. Now we've got 18,000 years ago, the most recent glacial maximum, right? When so much seawater was locked into ice on land. The sea level had decreased by almost 250 feet. You could walk from here to the Farallon Islands. And if you had done that, then you'd be sharing that plain with about 23 to 25 species of herbivorous mammal that weighed in excess of 150 pounds. Many much more than that. We're talking about 3 species of mammoth, for example, including the Columbian mammoth, the largest of the mammoth species. And so here I am, painting these gorgeous, late Cenozoic mammals and Cenozoic mammals, and really enjoying that late Pleistocene biodiversity, celebrating that, when in fact I know that there's this crash coming, the mass extinctions of the early Holocene, when all of these species went away, and what all of that herbivory, that grazing pressure on the ecosystem was then replaced with was anthropogenic fire pressure. So like you can cut these, you can cut a black sage down right to its base, and it'll just pop right back up, because these plants are like meant to be like nibbled right down to the bottom, and that's why they come right back up after fire. Same evolutionary process. There's this convergent evolution that happens, and discovering those patterns, those trajectories of life in California is an
endless
source of like joy and poetry to me.
We'll do this one last question and then some books. So Jennifer on Zoom is asking, can you speak briefly to the concept of the beloved wildlife urban interface?
Oh yeah. It's wild land and urban interface, actually.
Okay.
So WUI, fire practitioners call it the WUI. And it's where, remember I was talking about $4 trillion? I mean, California real estate alone, it's about $700 billion business per year. And that much money, more money than most countries on the planet do with their entire gross domestic product. About 50% of it occurs at the wildland urban interface, this place that corresponds exactly to the severe threat zone for fire in California, which also influences that, of course, the real estate market, which is another $700 billion here in California. So we're talking about insurance, we're talking about real estate, we're talking about transforming these pillars of economics that must adapt. They are absolutely 100% within the same system requirements as the rest of us. It's not like they exist outside of us. How could they not? How nothing exists out. When I say that getting right with fire in California will transform everything, it certainly should. Everything from software design and artificial intelligence to insurance policies. And there is room for that. There's room for this great economic transformation that is entirely as profitable. If you want to make money, fire is where to do it right now. And I don't think that is necessarily a negative thing either. I have no environmental hippie proclivities at all, because my interest is in the ecological functioning of this place and getting to the truth of the thing. And if making money is co-evolved with that, then let's do that. That's fine. In fact, I think remember I was talking about the precedent of water infrastructure in California? It's like that kind of thing will need to happen then for fire in order for us to get right with it. Because as I said, fire is always on the way. Fire will not be denied. Remember the fire tornadoes? That is a choice. That is a choice that we made. That fire tornado went through that neighborhood. And the answers are on the table. It's not like, we have the answers. Approaching them in a democratic context is an entirely different ball of wax Well, we got our best minds working on that too. Remember, I'm on the poetry end of things, not the policy.
Well, let's, why don't you join me in giving our speaker a hand, Obi Kaufmann.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you all there in the virtual land.
And you're gonna be over here with some of these books. I'm gonna jump on here and just do a farewell to everyone.
I'm shutting myself in.
So thank you, everyone here in the club rooms and on Zoom for joining us for this Book Club of California program. Please join us. What are you looking for?
My glasses.
Oh,
They're in my pocket.
they're in your pocket. Please join us for our next program a week from tonight, Monday, January 13th at 6 o'clock. Title is Cast Out of Eden. It is an in-person and virtual presentation by author and editor Robert McNally. You can register for that program online at bccbooks.org/programs. You can register for that program in the emails that you're getting from the book club. If you're not getting them, you should sign up for our mailing list, or you can contact me. I'm Kevin at bccbooks.org. I'm happy to sign you up for any program you're interested in. So thanks everyone for joining us. If you're interested and you're here in the club rooms in getting a copy of the book, please come on up, and we hope to see you again at another book club program. Thank you.